The Quantum Self and the Alchemical Dragon, a Jungian analysis of The Dragon in the Mist, and the Creation of Magic. Tiffany Salter, Ph.D. Introduction. Where Psychology Meets Physics. The Dragon in the Mist operates on multiple levels simultaneously, as a fantasy narrative, supported with the use of AI to add flavor, as a psychological journey, lessons learned in various academic programs, and as a metaphysical exploration of consciousness itself, lessons learned from life, and almost losing it. When examined through the lens of Carl Jung's analytical psychology and the counterintuitive principles of quantum mechanics, the story reveals itself as a profound meditation on how consciousness creates reality, and how understanding this process allows us to perform what can only be described as magic, the transformation of self and world through intentional observation and choice. Jung spent his career exploring the architecture of the psyche, mapping territories he called the personal unconscious, the collective unconscious, and the process of individuation, the journey towards psychological wholeness. Quantum mechanics, meanwhile, has spent the last century revealing that reality at its most fundamental level behaves in ways that seem to mirror psychological processes. Observation affects outcome, particles exist in superposition until measured, and entanglement suggests a fundamental interconnectedness that transcends space and time. The Dragon in the Mist is not merely a story that can be analyzed through these frameworks, it is a story that enacts these principles, demonstrating how the integration of shadow, the collapse of quantum possibilities into actualized reality, and the observer's role in creating their experienced world are all aspects of the same fundamental process. And in understanding this process, we discover the mechanism by which magic, the intentional transformation of reality through consciousness, becomes not supernatural, but natural, not impossible, but inevitable. Part 1. The Shroud. Entering the Fog of Possibility. Chapter 1. Lost in the Mist. The fog came first as a whisper, then as a wall. Seraphine had been flying for 3 days, or was it 3 weeks, when the mist began to curl around her wings like grasping fingers. At first, she thought nothing of it. Dragons were creatures of sky and storm, after all, and she had flown through worse. But this fog was different. It didn't part before her massive form or scatter in the wake of her wing beats. Instead, it thickened, pressing against her scales with an almost sentient persistence, until she could no longer see the tips of her own claws. She descended, thinking the ground might offer clarity, but the earth when it came was as obscured as the sky had been. Gray stone, gray moss, gray shadows that might have been trees or might have been nothing at all. The world had become a study in gradients of emptiness. Seraphine folded her wings against her sides and felt the immediate absence of purpose. Flying had given her direction, even if she hadn't known where she was going. Now, grounded in this colorless void, she was forced to confront the question she had been fleeing from since the moment she'd opened her eyes in that mountain cave, alone and unnamed. Who am I? Her earliest memory was fire. Not the warm, controlled flame of a hearth, but wild, consuming fire that had poured from her own throat in a torrent of terror and rage. She had woken surrounded by scorched stone, the acrid smell of burning filling her nostrils, and no memory of what had come before. No mother to teach her the ways of dragons. No hoard to guard, no territory to claim. Only the terrible certainty that she had destroyed something, though what, she couldn't say. The evidence of her nature was written in ash and char. Whatever she was dangerous. So she had fled, taken to the skies and flown until her wings ached, searching for, what? Answers. Redemption. A place where the fire inside her couldn't hurt anyone. Now the fog had found her, and she wondered if this was her punishment, to wander forever in this gray nothing, neither alive nor dead, neither monster nor anything else. Hello. Her voice emerged as a low rumble, the kind that could shake mountains when she was angry. But here, in the mist, it sounded small. Uncertain. Is anyone there? The fog swallowed her words without echo. Seraphine began to walk. The fog as quantum superposition. And the unconscious. The story opens with Seraphine entering a fog that behaves unlike any natural phenomenon. It didn't part before her massive form or scatter in the wake of her wing beats. Instead, it thickened, pressing against her scales with an almost sentient persistence. This fog is not merely atmospheric, it is ontological. It represents a state of being that exists between definition and dissolution, between actuality and possibility. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in a state of superposition, simultaneously occupying multiple states until the moment of observation collapses the wave function into a single, definite state. Schrödinger's famous cat exists in a superposition of alive and dead until someone opens the box and observes. The act of observation itself determines which reality manifests. The fog in which Seraphine finds herself is precisely this quantum superposition made manifest. She has entered what Whisper later calls the veil, a space between what is and what could be. This is not metaphorical language but a precise description of quantum reality. Seraphine exists in multiple potential states simultaneously: monster and hero, destroyer and protector, lost and found. The fog represents the collapse of certainty, the dissolution of the wave function of her identity into pure probability. From a Jungian perspective, this fog is the unconscious itself, that vast, undifferentiated realm of psychic content that exists before consciousness brings it into definition. Jung wrote extensively about how the unconscious contains not only repressed personal material but also the collective patterns and potentials of human experience. The fog is both Seraphine's personal unconscious, containing her lost memories and repressed identity, and the collective unconscious, containing archetypal patterns of hero, monster, shadow, and guide. The genius of this narrative is that these are not separate interpretations but unified descriptions of the same phenomenon. The quantum field of possibility and the Jungian unconscious are two languages describing the same territory, the realm of potential that precedes manifestation, the space where all possibilities exist simultaneously before consciousness collapses them into actuality. The observer effect and self-creation. Seraphine's journey through the fog is fundamentally about observation, specifically, self-observation. She is both the quantum particle and the observer, both the patient and the analyst. Her question, "Who am I?" is not a request for information but an act of measurement that will collapse her superposition into a definite state. The quantum observer effect states that the act of observation fundamentally alters what is observed. Before measurement, an electron exists as a probability wave, potentially anywhere. The moment we observe it, we force it to choose a location. The observer doesn't merely discover where the electron is, the observer participates in creating where the electron is. Seraphine's journey demonstrates this principle operating at the level of identity. She doesn't discover who she is, she creates who she is through the act of observation and choice. When she confronts her reflection in the impossible mirror, she is performing an act of quantum measurement on herself. The mirror shows her multiple possibilities: the monster she fears she is, the hero she might become. These aren't fantasies or lies, they are genuine quantum possibilities, all equally real until she collapses the wave function through choice. Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward becoming a whole, integrated self. But Jung understood something that modern psychology often misses: individuation is not about discovering a pre-existing self but about creating a self through conscious choice and integration. As Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." This is the first principle of magic: consciousness creates reality through observation and choice. We are not passive observers of a fixed universe but active participants in an ongoing act of creation. Every moment of self-observation is an act of self-creation. Every choice collapses infinite possibilities into a single actuality. Part 2. Reflections. The Mirror of Possibility. Chapter 2. Confronting the Self. Time moved strangely in the fog. Seraphine couldn't tell if she'd been walking for hours or days. Her stomach didn't growl with hunger, her muscles didn't ache with fatigue. It was as if the mist had suspended all the normal rules of existence, leaving only the endless gray and the sound of her own claws clicking against stone. She tried to remember more about herself, but her memories were fragments, sharp-edged and incomplete. Fire. Always fire. And screaming. Had that been her own voice, or someone else's? She couldn't be sure. You're a monster, she whispered to herself, testing the words. They felt true in a way that made her chest constrict. You destroy things. That's what you do. But even as she said it, something in her rebelled against the certainty. If she was truly a monster, why did the thought cause her such pain? Didn't monsters revel in destruction? Didn't they glory in their power? She didn't feel glorious. She felt lost. The fog shifted ahead of her, and for a moment, she thought she saw a shape, tall and angular, like a tower or a standing stone. She moved toward it, hope flaring in her chest. Anything was better than this endless nothing. But as she drew closer, the shape resolved itself into something else entirely, a mirror. It stood impossibly in the mist, taller than she was even with her neck fully extended, its surface perfectly smooth and reflective despite the dampness in the air. Seraphine approached cautiously, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had avoided her own reflection since waking. Some instinct had told her that seeing herself would make everything worse, would confirm the terrible suspicions that haunted her. But now, faced with this impossible mirror in this impossible place, she found she couldn't look away. The dragon in the glass was magnificent and terrible in equal measure. Her scales were the deep crimson of arterial blood, edged with gold that caught what little light existed in the fog. Her eyes were amber, bright and intelligent, with vertical pupils that contracted as she stared. Her horns swept back from her skull in elegant curves, and her wings, even folded, spoke of immense power. She was built for destruction, there was no denying that. Every line of her body was a weapon, from her razor-sharp claws to the spikes that ran down her spine. Monster, she breathed, and the dragon in the mirror mouthed the word with her. But then she looked closer, past the obvious instruments of violence, and saw something else. There was fear in those amber eyes, and sadness, and a desperate, aching loneliness that made her want to look away. Monsters didn't feel lonely, did they? Who are you? She asked her reflection. The mirror rippled like water, and suddenly the image changed. She saw herself standing in a village, but it wasn't burning. Instead, people, small, fragile humans, were looking up at her with expressions of wonder and gratitude. A child was touching her foreleg, fearless, while she lowered her great head to be closer to them. No, Seraphine said, stepping back. That's not real. That's not me. The mirror rippled again, showing her another scene, herself in flight, carrying something precious in her claws, a person. She was flying them to safety while below, some great darkness threatened to consume the land. Stop it! Her voice rose to a roar, and flame licked at the edges of her mouth. I'm not a hero. I'm not. I can't be. The mirror shattered, but it didn't break into pieces. Instead, it dissolved into mist, and the mist swirled around her, and in the swirling she heard a voice, or perhaps many voices, speaking as one. You are what you choose to be. Then the fog closed in again, thicker than before, and Seraphine was alone with her thoughts and the echo of words she didn't understand. the quantum Zeno effect and the power of observation. There's a phenomenon in quantum mechanics called the quantum Zeno effect, named after Zeno's paradox. If you observe a quantum system frequently enough, you can actually prevent it from changing states. Continuous observation freezes the system in its current state, preventing the natural evolution that would occur if the system were left unobserved. Seraphine's time in the fog can be understood through this lens. By continuously observing herself as a monster, by repeatedly measuring herself against that identity, she was freezing herself in that state. Her fear and self-observation were creating a quantum Zeno effect, preventing her from evolving into her true nature. The mirror's intervention breaks this cycle by introducing new information that forces a different kind of observation. Seraphine can no longer observe herself solely as a potential monster. She must now observe herself as a potential hero, a guardian dragon with a purpose and a history. This new observation allows the wave function to collapse in a different direction, manifesting a different reality. Jung understood this principle intuitively. He wrote extensively about how our complexes, autonomous patterns of thought and emotion, maintain themselves through repetition and reinforcement. We observe ourselves in certain ways, and those observations create feedback loops that reinforce the very patterns we're observing. Breaking free requires introducing new information, new perspectives, new ways of observing ourselves. This is the second principle of magic. Sustained observation creates sustained reality. What we continuously observe in ourselves and our world, we reinforce and perpetuate. To change reality, we must change what we observe and how we observe it. This is not positive thinking or denial, it is the recognition that observation itself is creative, and that by changing our observation, we change what manifests. Part 3. The Shadow. Confronting the Darkness Within. Chapter 3. The Black Dragon. Seraphine walked on, but now her mind churned with questions. The mirror had shown her things she couldn't reconcile with her understanding of herself. Heroes saved people. Heroes were brave and noble and good. She was none of those things. She was fire and destruction, a creature of nightmare-made flesh. Wasn't she? The fog began to change. It grew darker, taking on a purplish hue that reminded her of bruises. The air grew colder, and for the first time since entering this strange place, Seraphine felt genuine fear prickling along her spine. Something was moving in the mist ahead. She froze, every muscle tensing, ready to fight or flee. The shape grew larger, more defined, until it emerged from the fog like a ship from harbor mist. It was another dragon. But where Seraphine was crimson and gold, this dragon was black as a moonless night, its scales seeming to absorb what little light existed. It was larger than her, more heavily muscled, with horns that twisted like thorns and eyes that glowed a sickly green. When it opened its mouth, she could see rows of teeth like daggers, and smell the reek of decay on its breath. Well, the black dragon rumbled, its voice like grinding stone. What have we here? A lost little worm, wandering in the mist. Seraphine forced herself to stand tall, to meet those terrible eyes. Who are you? I am what you fear you are, the dragon said, circling her slowly. I am the monster in your nightmares. The destroyer. The bringer of ruin. I am everything you suspect yourself to be, given form and purpose. You're not real, Seraphine said, but her voice shook. Oh. I'm real enough. As real as your doubts. As real as your fear. The black dragon's tail lashed, sending up sparks where it struck the stone. You think you're different from me. You think that because you feel guilt, because you run from your nature, that makes you better. You're a dragon, little one. We are made for destruction. It's in our blood, our bones, our very breath. No, Seraphine said, but the word came out weak. Yes, the black dragon hissed, bringing its face close to hers. You've already killed, haven't you? You woke up surrounded by ash and death. You don't remember it, but your body does. Your fire does. That's why you run, because you know what you are. You know what you'll do again. The words struck her like physical blows. Because they were true, weren't they? She had woken in destruction. She had fled because she was dangerous. Everything this creature said aligned with her deepest fears. I don't want to be a monster, she whispered. Want has nothing to do with it, the black dragon said. You are what you are. The sooner you accept it, the sooner you can stop this pathetic running and embrace your true nature. Join me. Together, we could burn this world to cinders. We could make them all fear us as they should. Seraphine looked at the black dragon, at its cruel eyes and twisted horns, and felt something shift inside her. Yes. This creature spoke to her fears. Yes. It gave voice to her darkest suspicions about herself. But it was wrong. No, she said again, and this time her voice was steady. You're not what I am. You're what I'm afraid of becoming. There's a difference. The black dragon's eyes narrowed. Semantics. Fear. Nature. It all leads to the same place. Does it? Seraphine felt heat building in her chest, but it wasn't the wild, uncontrolled fire of her awakening. This was different. Purposeful. If I were truly a monster, I wouldn't care about the destruction I caused. I wouldn't have run. I wouldn't be here, searching for answers. Monsters don't question themselves. Pretty words, the black dragon snarled. But words won't change what you are. You're right, Seraphine said, and she felt something click into place, like a key turning in a lock. Words won't change what I am. But I will. Every choice I make, every action I take, those things define me. Not my fears, not my past, not you. She took a step forward, and the black dragon actually retreated. I am a dragon, Seraphine continued, her voice growing stronger. Yes. I have fire. Yes. I have claws and teeth and the power to destroy. But I also have a mind, a heart, a choice, and I choose not to be you. The black dragon roared, a sound of pure rage and frustration, and lunged at her. Seraphine didn't think, she simply reacted. Fire poured from her throat, but it wasn't the wild, chaotic flame of her nightmares. It was controlled, precise, a barrier of light and heat that stopped the black dragon in its tracks. I am not a monster, Seraphine said, and her voice rang with certainty. I am not you. The black dragon screamed, a sound of such anguish that Seraphine almost felt sorry for it. Then it began to dissolve, breaking apart into wisps of dark smoke that the fog quickly absorbed. As it faded, she heard its final words, we'll see what you become. Then it was gone, and Seraphine was alone again. But she didn't feel alone. She felt, for the first time since waking, like she was beginning to understand something important. The black dragon as Jungian shadow. The appearance of the black dragon represents one of the most psychologically sophisticated moments in the narrative. This creature is explicitly identified as Seraphine's shadow. I am what you fear you are, it tells her. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is the repository of everything we reject about ourselves, our fears, our rage, our capacity for destruction, our unacceptable impulses and characteristics. Jung insisted that the shadow is not evil, it is simply unconscious. It becomes dangerous only when it remains unacknowledged, operating autonomously in the darkness of the psyche. The path to wholeness requires confronting the shadow, acknowledging it, and integrating its energy into conscious awareness. As Jung famously wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Quote, The black dragon embodies everything Seraphine fears about herself: destructive power, monstrosity, the capacity to harm. It speaks with the voice of her deepest anxieties. You've already killed, haven't you? You woke up surrounded by ash and death. That's why you run, because you know what you are. You know what you'll do again. What makes this encounter profound is that the shadow dragon is not entirely wrong. Seraphine does possess destructive power. She is capable of violence. Her fire can kill. These are facts, not fears. The shadow speaks truth, but it speaks only partial truth, and it insists that this partial truth is the whole truth. Quantum complementarity and psychological wholeness. Here we encounter one of quantum mechanics' most profound principles: complementarity. Niels Bohr demonstrated that light behaves as both a wave and a particle, depending on how we observe it. These seem like contradictory properties. How can something be both? But quantum mechanics reveals that reality itself contains complementary aspects that seem contradictory from a classical perspective but are both true simultaneously. Seraphine embodies quantum complementarity. She is both dangerous and protective, both capable of destruction and capable of creation, both monster and hero. These are not contradictions but complementary aspects of a unified whole. The shadow dragon insists on collapsing this complementarity into a single, negative identity: you are a monster, therefore you cannot be anything else. Seraphine's response demonstrates the integration of opposites that Jung considered essential to individuation. I am a dragon. Yes. I have fire. Yes. I have claws and teeth and the power to destroy. But I also have a mind, a heart, a choice. This is not denial of the shadow but integration of it. She acknowledges her capacity for destruction while refusing to be defined solely by it. She accepts the wave and the particle, the darkness and the light, the monster and the hero as complementary aspects of her complete self. The moment of integration is marked by her use of fire against the shadow dragon, but notice that this fire is different from the wild, uncontrolled flame of her nightmares. It is controlled, precise, a barrier of light and heat. She has integrated her destructive power by bringing it under conscious control. The shadow's energy is not destroyed but transformed, incorporated into her conscious identity. The collapse of the shadow and the creation of wholeness. When Seraphine declares, I am not a monster. I am not you, the shadow dragon dissolves. From a quantum perspective, she has collapsed the wave function of her identity, choosing which possibility will manifest as reality. From a Jungian perspective, she has integrated the shadow, transforming unconscious content into conscious awareness. But notice the shadow's final words: we'll see what you become. The shadow is not destroyed, it is transformed. It becomes part of her, no longer autonomous and threatening but integrated and available. This is crucial. Jung never advocated destroying the shadow but integrating it. The energy of the shadow, once integrated, becomes available for conscious use. This is the third principle of magic. Wholeness is achieved not by rejecting parts of ourselves but by integrating them. The energy we spend repressing the shadow becomes available when we acknowledge and integrate it. We become more powerful, more complete, more capable of intentional action in the world. In quantum terms, we might say that Seraphine has achieved quantum coherence, a state where all aspects of her being are aligned and working together rather than interfering with each other destructively. Quantum coherence allows for phenomena that seem impossible from a classical perspective: particles acting in concert across vast distances, energy transferring with perfect efficiency, information processing at speeds that classical systems cannot achieve. Psychological integration creates a similar coherence in consciousness. When we are no longer at war with ourselves, when shadow and persona work together rather than against each other, we achieve a state of psychological coherence that allows for actions and insights that seem magical from the perspective of a fragmented psyche. Part 4. The Voice. Receiving Guidance and Truth. Chapter 4. Whisper appears. The fog began to thin after her encounter with the shadow dragon. Not all at once, but gradually, like a curtain being slowly drawn back. Seraphine could see farther now, 10 feet, then 20, then 50. The gray stone beneath her feet gave way to actual earth, and she could see the shapes of trees emerging from the mist. She was exhausted, she realized. Not physically, her body still felt strong, untouched by hunger or fatigue, but emotionally. Spiritually, the confrontation with her own fears had drained something from her, left her feeling hollow and uncertain despite her brave words. Had she meant what she said? Did she truly believe she could choose her own path, or had that been just another form of denial? "You're thinking too much." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, gentle and amused. Seraphine spun, searching for its source, but saw nothing. "Who's there?" she called. "Someone who's been waiting for you to find yourself," the voice replied. "Or at least to start looking in the right direction." The fog parted, and a figure emerged. It was human, or at least human-shaped, but there was something otherworldly about it. Its features were indistinct, shifting slightly whenever Seraphine tried to focus on them, and it seemed to glow with a soft, silvery light. "What are you?" Seraphine asked. "A guide, a guardian, a fragment of something larger." The figure smiled. "Names are complicated here. You can call me Whisper, if you need to call me something." "Where is here?" Seraphine looked around at the thinning fog. "What is this place?" "The Veil," Whisper said. "A space between what is and what could be. You came here because you were lost, Seraphine. Not just physically, but in every way that matters. You know my name." It wasn't a question. "I know many things about you. I know you woke alone, with no memory of your past. I know you found yourself surrounded by destruction and assumed you were its cause. I know you've been running ever since, terrified of what you might be." Seraphine's tail lashed. "If you know so much, then tell me, am I a monster? Did I kill someone when I woke? Is that why I can't remember?" Whisper's expression grew sad. "You're asking the wrong questions." "Then what are the right questions?" Seraphine's voice rose in frustration. "I need to know what I am. I need to know if I'm dangerous, if I'm." "You need to know who you choose to be," Whisper interrupted gently. "The past is important, Seraphine, but it's not everything. You are not defined solely by what came before. But I need to know." Seraphine felt tears, actual tears, burning in her eyes. She hadn't known dragons could cry. "How can I choose who to be if I don't know who I was?" Whisper was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those strange, shifting eyes. Finally, the figure sighed. "Very well, I'll tell you what you want to know. But understand, knowledge is not the same as wisdom. Knowing your past won't necessarily help you find your future." "I don't care," Seraphine said. "I need to know. You were created," Whisper said simply. "Not born, but made. Crafted by ancient magic in a time of desperate need. You are a guardian dragon, Seraphine, one of 7 created to protect this world from a great darkness that threatened to consume everything." Seraphine stared. "Created. But dragons aren't created. We're born from eggs, we. Most dragons, yes. But you are not most dragons. You and your 6 siblings were forged from fire and starlight, given life and purpose by the last of the elder mages. Your purpose was, is, to stand against the shadow that seeks to devour all light, all life, all hope. The destruction I woke up in," Seraphine said slowly. "That wasn't me. It was and it wasn't," Whisper said. You were in the middle of a battle when something went wrong. The shadow found a way to attack you from within, to corrupt your memories, to make you doubt yourself. The destruction you saw was the aftermath of that battle, but you weren't the destroyer, Seraphine. You were the defender. The scorched earth, the ash, the char, those were the remnants of shadow creatures you had burned away to protect a village of innocents. The words hit her like a physical force. No, that can't be right. If I was protecting people, why would I wake up alone? Why wouldn't they? The shadow's attack damaged more than your memories, Whisper said gently. It damaged your sense of self. The villagers tried to help you, tried to thank you, but you were so lost in confusion and fear that you fled before they could reach you. You've been running ever since, convinced you were a monster, while the world you were created to protect falls deeper into darkness. Seraphine felt her legs give way. She collapsed onto the ground, her mind reeling. I'm not a monster. No, child. You're a hero. You always have been. But the fire, I can't control it. You can control it, Whisper said firmly. You did control it, for years, before the shadow's attack. And you're already beginning to remember how. The fire you used against your shadow self, that was controlled. Precise. That was the real you, beginning to emerge from the fog of doubt and fear. Seraphine looked down at her claws, at her crimson scales, seeing them with new eyes. Not weapons of destruction, but tools of protection. Not a monster's body, but a guardian's. Why didn't you just tell me this from the beginning? She asked. Why make me wander through the fog, face my fears, all of that? Because you wouldn't have believed me, Whisper said simply. If I had told you immediately that you were a hero, you would have rejected it. You needed to confront your fears, to choose for yourself who you wanted to be. The truth I've given you now is just information. The truth you discovered in facing your shadow, that you have the power to choose your own path, that's wisdom. That's what will sustain you in the battles to come. Quote, battles. Seraphine looked up sharply. What battles? Whisper's expression grew grave. The shadow is rising, Seraphine. It grows stronger every day, consuming villages, corrupting the land, spreading despair and darkness. Your 6 siblings are fighting, but they're losing ground. They need you. The world needs you. But I don't remember how to fight. I don't remember anything about being a guardian. You will, Whisper said. The memories will return, now that you've begun to remember yourself. But more importantly, you don't need your old memories to be who you are. You are a guardian dragon, Seraphine. That truth lives in your bones, in your fire, in your heart. Trust yourself, and the rest will follow. The fog was almost gone now. Seraphine could see a landscape beyond it, rolling hills, a forest, and in the distance, a dark stain on the horizon that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. That's the shadow, she asked, pointing with one claw. The edge of it, yes. It spreads from the north, consuming everything in its path. Your siblings are holding the line at the broken peaks, but they can't hold forever. Not without you. Seraphine stood, testing her wings. They felt strong, ready. How do I find them? Fly north, Whisper said. Follow the darkness, it will lead you to the light of your siblings' fire. They'll sense you coming, once you're close enough. Will I see you again? Seraphine asked. Whisper smiled. Perhaps. The veil touches many places, and I am always here for those who are lost. But I don't think you'll be lost anymore, Seraphine. I think you've found what you were looking for. I found more questions than answers, Seraphine said, but she was smiling too. That's how you know you're on the right path, Whisper said. Only fools think they have all the answers. The figure began to fade, dissolving back into the last wisps of fog. One more thing, Seraphine. Remember, being a hero doesn't mean being fearless. It means being afraid and choosing to act anyway. You will doubt yourself again. You will face moments when the old fears return. But you've proven you can overcome them. Hold on to that. I will, Seraphine promised. Then go, Whisper said, now barely visible. Your family is waiting. Your world is waiting. Show them what a guardian dragon can do. And then the voice was gone, and the fog was gone, and Seraphine stood in clear air under a gray sky, looking north toward darkness and destiny. Whisper as psychopomp and observer. The appearance of Whisper introduces a figure that operates simultaneously on multiple levels. In Jungian terms, Whisper is a psychopomp, a guide of souls, a figure that appears in myths and dreams to help the hero navigate the underworld or the unconscious. Whisper explicitly identifies as a guide, a guardian, a fragment of something larger. But Whisper is also something more, an observer who collapses the wave function of Seraphine's identity by providing information. When Whisper reveals Seraphine's true nature, that she is a guardian dragon, created to protect rather than destroy, this information fundamentally alters Seraphine's reality. She is not discovering a pre-existing fact but collapsing quantum possibilities into a definite state through the act of observation and acknowledgement. Notice Whisper's crucial statement, if I had told you immediately that you were a hero, you would have rejected it. You needed to confront your fears, to choose for yourself who you wanted to be. The truth I've given you now is just information. The truth you discovered in facing your shadow, that you have the power to choose your own path, that's wisdom. This distinction between information and wisdom is profound. Information collapses possibilities into actualities, but wisdom is the understanding of how the collapse occurs, the recognition that consciousness itself is the collapsing agent. Whisper could have told Seraphine her history immediately, but that would have been merely information. Seraphine needed to experience the process of self-creation through choice to gain wisdom, to understand that she is not merely discovering who she is but actively creating who she is through observation and decision. Part 5. The Flight, Reunion and the Power of Unity. Chapter 5. Finding Her Siblings. Seraphine spread her wings and felt the wind catch beneath them. It felt different now, not like escape, but like purpose. She wasn't running anymore. She was flying towards something, not away from it. As she climbed into the sky, she felt something stirring in her mind, memories, yes, but also instincts, knowledge that had been locked away by fear and doubt. She remembered training with her siblings, 6 other dragons of different colors and temperaments. She remembered the elder mage who had created them, an ancient woman with kind eyes who had called them her children. She remembered the first time she had seen the shadow, a creeping darkness that devoured light and life, and the fierce determination she had felt to stop it. She remembered who she was. The flight north took hours, but Seraphine didn't tire. If anything, she felt stronger with every wing beat, as if the simple act of moving toward her purpose was restoring something that had been depleted. The landscape below changed from green hills to rocky terrain, and she could see the signs of the shadow's influence, withered trees, blackened earth, villages abandoned and silent. But she could also see signs of resistance. Here and there, she spotted lights, campfires, torches, the glow of magic. People were still fighting, still hoping. They just needed help. They needed her. The broken peaks rose before her like jagged teeth, and beyond them, she could see it, a wall of darkness that seemed to stretch from earth to sky, roiling and churning like a living thing. And fighting at its edge, holding the line with fire and fury, were 6 dragons. Seraphine's heart soared. Her siblings. There was Aurelius, golden and massive, his flames burning white hot as he carved through shadow creatures. Beside him flew Tempest, blue-gray and swift, calling down lightning from the storm clouds above. Verdant, green as spring leaves, was using her magic to create barriers of living wood that held back the darkness. Frost, pale as winter snow, breathed ice that froze the shadow's advance. Ember, orange and fierce, fought with a wild joy that made Seraphine smile. And finally, Obsidian, black but nothing like the shadow dragon she had faced. His darkness was the darkness of rich earth and deep caves, solid and protective. They were magnificent. They were her family, and they were losing. Even from a distance, Seraphine could see they were exhausted. Their movements were slower than they should be, their flames less intense. The shadow pressed against them relentlessly, and for every creature they destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. Seraphine didn't hesitate. She folded her wings and dove. The shadow creatures saw her coming, twisted things of darkness and malice, with too many limbs and eyes that glowed with sickly light. They turned toward her, shrieking, and Seraphine felt a moment of fear. Then she remembered Whisper's words, being a hero doesn't mean being fearless. It means being afraid and choosing to act anyway. She opened her mouth and let her fire pour forth. It was glorious. Not the wild, uncontrolled flame of her nightmares, but pure, focused power. Crimson and gold, her fire cut through the shadow creatures like a blade through silk, burning away the darkness and leaving only clean ash behind. She felt the rightness of it in her bones, the purpose she had been created for finally fulfilled. Seraphine. Aurelius's voice was a roar of joy and relief. The golden dragon wheeled toward her, his eyes bright with tears. Sister, you've returned. I'm sorry I was gone, Seraphine called back, burning through another wave of shadow creatures. I was lost, but I found my way back. You're here now, Tempest said, lightning crackling around her horns. That's what matters. Welcome home, sister. The 6 dragons reformed their line, and now there were 7. Seraphine took her place among them, and she felt something click into place, not just in her mind, but in the world itself. The 7 guardian dragons, together again. Complete. The shadow seemed to sense it too. It recoiled, pulling back from the combined might, and for the first time in months, the darkness retreated. We can't hold this forever, Obsidian said, his voice deep and steady. The shadow is too vast, too powerful. We need a plan. We need to find its source, Verdant added. Cut off the head, and the body will die. The source is in the Shadowlands, Frost said. Beyond the peaks, in the place where light has never reached. It's a suicide mission. Then it's a good thing we're already dead, Ember said with a fierce grin. We're not alive in the normal sense, we're magic given form. We can't die unless our purpose is fulfilled or our magic is broken. Or unless the shadow consumes us, Aurelius said grimly. Which it will, if we're not careful. Seraphine listened to her siblings debate, and felt something stirring in her chest. Not fire this time, but certainty. She knew what they had to do. We go together, she said, and 6 pairs of eyes turned to her. All 7 of us, into the heart of the shadow. We were created for this. We were made to stand against the darkness, and we can't do that by holding a line forever. We have to take the fight to the enemy. It's dangerous, Aurelius said. We could all be lost. We're already lost if we don't try, Seraphine countered. The shadow grows stronger every day. Eventually, it will overwhelm us. Our only chance is to strike now, while we're still strong enough to fight. She's right, Tempest said. I hate to admit it, but she's right. We can't win a defensive war against an enemy that never tires. One by one, the other dragons nodded. Even Aurelius, who had always been the most cautious, dipped his great head in agreement. Then we go at dawn, he said. We rest tonight, gather our strength, and at first light, we fly into the Shadowlands. Together. Quote. Together, the 7 dragons echoed, and Seraphine felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with fire. She had been lost, but now she was found. She had feared she was a monster, but now she knew she was a hero. And tomorrow, she would prove it, not just to the world, but to herself. The collective unconscious and non-local correlation. When Seraphine reunites with her 6 siblings, we encounter a phenomenon that quantum mechanics calls entanglement and Jung called the collective unconscious. The 7 guardian dragons are described as being created together, forged from the same source, and when they reunite, she felt something click into place, not just in her mind, but in the world itself. Quantum entanglement is one of the most mysterious and well-verified phenomena in physics. When 2 particles become entangled, they remain connected regardless of the distance between them. Measuring one particle instantaneously affects the other, even if they're on opposite sides of the universe. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance, and was deeply uncomfortable with it, but experiments have repeatedly confirmed that entanglement is real. The 7 guardian dragons are entangled, not just emotionally or symbolically, but ontologically. They are aspects of a single system, and what affects one affects all. When Seraphine was lost, her siblings felt the absence. When she returns, the system becomes complete again, and this completion is felt not just by the dragons but by the world itself. Jung's concept of the collective unconscious operates on similar principles. He proposed that beneath our personal unconscious lies a deeper layer of psyche that is shared by all humans, a realm of archetypal patterns and potentials that transcends individual consciousness. When we tap into the collective unconscious, we access patterns and energies that are not merely personal but universal. The 7 guardian dragons can be understood as archetypal forces, aspects of the collective unconscious made manifest. Each dragon represents a different quality or energy: Aurelius, leadership and light; Tempest, transformation and power; Verdant, growth and protection; Frost, clarity and preservation; Ember, passion and courage; Obsidian, depth and stability; and Seraphine, choice and integration. Together, they form a complete system, a mandala of consciousness. Coherence, decoherence, and the power of unity. When the 7 dragons fight together, they achieve something that none could achieve alone. This is not merely the sum of their individual powers but a synergistic effect that emerges from their unity. In quantum terms, they achieve quantum coherence, a state where their wave functions align and reinforce each other rather than interfering destructively. Quantum coherence is fragile. It's easily disrupted by interaction with the environment, a process called decoherence. This is why quantum effects are typically only observed at very small scales or very low temperatures. The noise of the environment causes decoherence, collapsing quantum superpositions into classical states. But when coherence is maintained, remarkable things become possible. Quantum computers leverage coherence to perform calculations that would take classical computers millennia. Photosynthesis uses quantum coherence to transfer energy with near-perfect efficiency. Birds may use quantum entanglement in their navigation systems. The 7 guardian dragons maintain coherence through their unity of purpose and the conscious choice to work together. Aurelius's warning is crucial. No matter what the shadow throws at us, no matter how it tries to separate us or turn us against each other, we stay together. Our strength is in our unity. The shadow, which we can understand as entropy, as decoherence, as the force that breaks down order and coherence, tries to separate them, to cause them to interfere destructively with each other. But by maintaining their unity, by choosing coherence over decoherence, they achieve effects that seem magical. They push back the darkness, they heal the corrupted land, they defeat an enemy that seemed invincible. This is the fourth principle of magic: coherence creates power. When the various aspects of ourselves work together rather than against each other, when we align with others in shared purpose, when we maintain unity in the face of forces that would fragment us, we achieve effects that seem impossible from the perspective of fragmented consciousness. Jung called this the self, the archetype of wholeness, the integration of all aspects of psyche into a unified, coherent whole. The self is not the ego, the conscious I, but something larger, the totality of psyche, conscious and unconscious, personal and collective, integrated into a functioning unity. Achieving the self is the goal of individuation, and it grants access to energies and insights that the fragmented ego cannot access. Part 6. Into Shadow. The Final Battle. Chapter 6. Confronting the Shadow Lord. Dawn came gray and cold, but the 7 guardian dragons were ready. They had spent the night in council, planning their approach, sharing what they knew of the shadow and its weaknesses. Seraphine had listened and learned, her memories continuing to return in fragments and flashes. She remembered now that the shadow was not a natural thing, but a corruption, the remnant of an ancient evil that had been defeated once before but never truly destroyed. It fed on fear, on despair, on the darkness that lived in every heart. And it could only be truly defeated by those who had faced their own darkness and chosen light. She had faced her darkness in the fog. She had looked at her deepest fears and rejected them. That made her, perhaps, the most qualified of all of them to face what lay ahead. "Are you ready?" Aurelius asked, landing beside her on the rocky outcrop where she stood watching the sunrise. "No," Seraphine said honestly. "But I'm going anyway." Aurelius laughed, a sound like distant thunder. "That's the spirit of a true guardian. You know, we thought we'd lost you forever. When you disappeared after the battle, when we couldn't find you no matter how hard we searched, we feared the shadow had taken you." "It tried," Seraphine said. "It took my memories, made me doubt myself. But it couldn't take my choice. In the end, that's what saved me." "Choice," Aurelius mused. "Yes. That's always been our greatest weapon, hasn't it? The shadow can't choose, it can only consume. But we can choose to fight, to sacrifice, to hope. That's what makes us stronger." "I hope you're right," Seraphine said. "Because we're about to test that theory." The other dragons were gathering now, forming up in AV formation with Aurelius at the point. Seraphine took her place in the formation, feeling the rightness of it, the way their magic resonated with each other. "Remember," Aurelius called out, his voice carrying to all of them. "We stay together. No matter what the shadow throws at us, no matter how it tries to separate us or turn us against each other, we stay together. Our strength is in our unity." "Together," the dragons chorused. Then they launched themselves into the sky, 7 streaks of color against the gray dawn, flying north toward the heart of darkness. The Shadowlands were worse than Seraphine had imagined. The darkness here was so thick it was almost physical, pressing against her scales like oil. The air tasted of rot and despair, and she could hear whispers in the wind, voices that spoke of failure and futility, that told her to turn back, to give up, to accept the inevitable. She ignored them. She had heard worse in the fog. Shadow creatures rose to meet them, thousands of them, a seething mass of darkness and malice. The dragons met them with fire and fury, carving a path through the horde. Seraphine fought alongside her siblings, her flames burning away the darkness, and she felt a fierce joy in the battle. This was what she was made for. This was her purpose. But the deeper they flew into the Shadowlands, the harder it became. The darkness pressed closer, and the whispers grew louder. Seraphine could feel the shadow trying to get inside her head, trying to find her fears and exploit them. You're not really a hero, the voices whispered. You're just pretending. You're still that lost, frightened dragon who woke up alone. You don't belong here. I choose to be here, Seraphine said through gritted teeth, burning through another wave of creatures. That's what makes me a hero. But what if you fail? What if you lead your siblings to their deaths? What if you're the reason the world falls to darkness? Then I fail, Seraphine said. But I'll fail trying, not running. The whispers recoiled, and she felt a surge of triumph. The shadow could only hurt her if she let it. And she had already faced her fears in the fog. She knew who she was now. There, Verdant called out, pointing with one claw. I can see it, the heart of the shadow. Ahead of them, the darkness coalesced into a massive structure, a tower of pure shadow that stretched impossibly high, pulsing with malevolent energy. At its base, Seraphine could see a figure, humanoid but wrong, its features constantly shifting, its body made of darkness so deep it seemed to absorb light itself. The Shadow Lord, Aurelius breathed. The source of all this corruption. Then let's end this, Ember snarled, diving toward the tower. Wait, Seraphine called out, but it was too late. Ember was already committed to her attack, flames streaming from her jaws. The Shadow Lord raised one hand, and the darkness surged up to meet Ember. It wrapped around her like chains, pulling her down, and she screamed, a sound of pure agony that made Seraphine's heart clench. Ember! Obsidian dove after his sister, but the shadow caught him too, dragging both dragons toward the ground. No, Seraphine didn't think. She simply acted, diving after her siblings, her fire blazing brighter than it ever had before. She crashed into the shadow that held them, burning it away with the sheer intensity of her flames. Ember and Obsidian fell free, gasping, and Seraphine caught them, her wings straining with the weight. Get back to the others, she commanded. I'll hold it off. Seraphine, no, Obsidian began, but she cut him off. Trust me, she said. I know what I'm doing. She didn't, not really. But she knew she couldn't let her siblings die. Not when she had just found them again. Seraphine turned to face the Shadow Lord, and she felt something shift inside her. All the fear, all the doubt, all the questions about who she was and what she was meant to be, they fell away, leaving only clarity. She was Seraphine. She was a guardian dragon. And she was going to save the world. You cannot defeat me, the Shadow Lord said, its voice like the whisper of dead leaves. I am eternal. I am inevitable. I am the darkness that lives in every heart. Maybe, Seraphine said, but I'm the light that refuses to go out. She opened her mouth and let her fire pour forth, not just the physical flame, but everything she was. Her hope, her determination, her love for her siblings and the world they protected. She poured it all into the fire, and it blazed with a light that made the Shadow Lord recoil. Impossible, it hissed. You are nothing. You are. I am enough, Seraphine said. And she was. The fire consumed the Shadow Lord, burning away the darkness, and as it died, it screamed, a sound of rage and disbelief that echoed across the Shadowlands. Then it was gone, and the Tower of Shadow began to crumble. Seraphine, Aurelius's voice cut through the chaos. The whole place is collapsing. We need to go. Seraphine turned and flew, her siblings forming up around her. Together, the 7 guardian dragons raced out of the Shadowlands as the darkness collapsed behind them, imploding on itself now that its source was destroyed. They burst out into clear air, into sunlight, and Seraphine felt tears streaming down her face. They had done it. They had actually done it. You saved us, Ember said, flying close beside her. You saved all of us. We saved each other, Seraphine corrected. That's what family does. The nature of the enemy. The Shadow Lord that the dragon's face is described as humanoid but wrong, its features constantly shifting, its body made of darkness so deep it seemed to absorb light itself. This is not merely a monster but a principle, the principle of entropy, of decoherence, of the collapse of order into chaos. In thermodynamics, entropy is the measure of disorder in a system. The second law of thermodynamics states that entropy always increases in a closed system, order naturally breaks down into disorder, structure dissolves into chaos, information degrades into noise. This is why ice melts, why buildings crumble, why memories fade. Entropy is the arrow of time, the force that ensures that everything eventually falls apart. But the second law only applies to closed systems. Open systems, systems that exchange energy and information with their environment, can decrease their local entropy by increasing entropy elsewhere. Life itself is an entropy-decreasing process. Living organisms create order, their own bodies, their behaviors, their societies, by consuming energy and exporting entropy to their environment. The Shadow Lord represents entropy made conscious and malevolent. It is the force that breaks down order, that corrupts structure, that turns coherence into decoherence. It feeds on fear and despair because these emotions represent psychological entropy, the breakdown of psychological coherence, the fragmentation of the self. From a Jungian perspective, the Shadow Lord is the ultimate shadow, not the personal shadow of repressed content, but the archetypal shadow, the principle of dissolution and chaos that stands opposed to the principle of order and creation. It is what Jung called the terrible mother, or the devouring father, the archetypal force that destroys rather than creates, that consumes rather than nourishes. The hero's fire and the reversal of entropy. When Seraphine faces the Shadow Lord, she performs an act that seems to violate the second law of thermodynamics. She reverses entropy. Her fire, described as not just the physical flame, but everything she was. Her hope, her determination, her love for her siblings and the world they protected, is not merely destructive but creative. It doesn't just burn away the Shadow Lord, it transforms chaos back into order, entropy back into coherence. How is this possible? In quantum mechanics, there's a concept called negentropy, negative entropy, or the creation of order from disorder. Living systems are negentropic, they create order locally by consuming energy. But consciousness may be even more fundamentally negentropic. The act of observation itself creates order by collapsing quantum superpositions into definite states, by transforming infinite possibility into specific actuality. Seraphine's fire is consciousness made manifest. It is the observer effect weaponized, the collapse of the wave function directed with intention. When she pours everything she was into the fire, she is not merely burning the Shadow Lord, she is observing it out of existence, collapsing its wave function from existing to not existing. This is not fantasy but a literal description of how consciousness interacts with reality at the quantum level. The observer doesn't merely witness reality, the observer participates in creating reality through the act of observation. Seraphine's fire is the light of consciousness itself, and consciousness is the ultimate negentropic force, the power that creates order from chaos, meaning from randomness, coherence from decoherence. Jung understood this principle in psychological terms. He wrote about how consciousness is the light that illuminates the darkness of the unconscious, transforming chaotic, autonomous complexes into integrated aspects of the self. The process of individuation is fundamentally negentropic. It creates psychological order from psychological chaos, integrates fragments into wholeness, transforms the many into the one. The sacrifice and the transformation. Notice that Seraphine's victory requires sacrifice. She doesn't defeat the Shadow Lord through superior force but through the willingness to pour everything she is into the fire. This is not destruction but transformation. she transforms herself from a separate, individual consciousness into something larger, something that encompasses her siblings, the world they protect, and the very principle of order itself. This is the fifth principle of magic. Transformation requires sacrifice. Not sacrifice in the sense of loss, but sacrifice in the sense of making sacred, transforming the profane into the sacred, the individual into the universal, the separate into the unified. Seraphine sacrifices her separateness, her individual identity, and in doing so, she becomes something greater. In quantum terms, she achieves maximum entanglement. She becomes entangled not just with her siblings but with the entire system she's protecting. Her wave function expands to encompass the whole, and in that expansion, she gains access to energies and capabilities that her individual wave function could never access. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psychological process by which opposites are united and transcended, creating something new that contains both but is greater than either. The transcendent function is the mechanism of psychological transformation, the process by which we move from fragmentation to wholeness, from unconsciousness to consciousness, from ego to self. Epilogue. The light. The ongoing creation of reality. The world healed slowly, but it healed. With the Shadow Lord destroyed, the corruption began to recede, and life returned to the places that had been consumed by darkness. Villages were rebuilt, forests grew green again, and people began to hope once more. The 7 guardian dragons became legends, stories told around campfires, songs sung by bards, symbols of hope in a world that had nearly fallen to despair. But they didn't let the fame change them. They continued their work, patrolling the borders of the world, watching for any sign that the darkness might return. Seraphine often thought about her time in the fog, about the journey that had led her to discover who she truly was. She had been so certain she was a monster, so afraid of her own power. But she had learned that power itself was neither good nor evil, it was the choice of how to use it that mattered. She had chosen to be a hero. And every day, she chose it again. One evening, as she sat on a mountain peak watching the sunset, she felt a familiar presence beside her. She turned to find Whisper standing there, that same gentle smile on their shifting features. "Hello again," Seraphine said. "I wondered if I'd see you. I told you I'd be here for those who are lost," Whisper said. "Though you're not lost anymore, are you?" "No," Seraphine said. "I know exactly where I am and who I am. Thanks to you. Thanks to yourself," Whisper corrected. "I only showed you the path. You were the one who chose to walk it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Will the shadow return?" Seraphine asked finally. "Perhaps," Whisper said. "Darkness is a part of the world, just as light is. There will always be battles to fight, fears to face, choices to make. But you'll be ready. You've proven that." "I'm still afraid sometimes," Seraphine admitted. "I still doubt myself." "Good," Whisper said. "That means you're still thinking, still questioning, still growing. The day you stop being afraid is the day you stop being careful. And the day you stop doubting is the day you stop learning." Seraphine laughed. "So I'm supposed to be afraid and doubtful forever?" "No," Whisper said. "You're supposed to be afraid and doubtful sometimes, and brave and certain other times. You're supposed to be complex and contradictory and beautifully, messily alive. That's what makes you a hero, Seraphine, not that you're perfect, but that you're real." The figure began to fade, dissolving into the evening light. "Will I see you again?" Seraphine asked. "When you need to," Whisper said. "The veil is always there, for those who need to find themselves. But I don't think you'll need it for a long time. You've found what you were looking for." "What was I looking for?" Seraphine asked. Whisper's smile was the last thing to fade. "Yourself. and the courage to be her. Then the guide was gone, and Seraphine was alone on the mountain. But she didn't feel alone. She felt connected, to her siblings, to the world, to her purpose. She felt, for the first time since waking in that cave surrounded by ash, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She spread her wings and took to the sky, her crimson scales catching the last light of the sun. Below her, she could see villages with their lights beginning to glow, people going about their lives, safe and unafraid. She had been lost in the fog, terrified she was a monster. But she had found herself, and discovered she was a hero. And tomorrow, she would choose to be a hero again. And the day after that. And the day after that. For as long as the world needed her. For as long as she had the courage to choose. Forever. The healed world and sustained observation. The epilogue describes how the world healed slowly, but it healed. This is not automatic or instantaneous. It requires sustained effort, sustained observation, sustained choice. The 7 guardian dragons continue their work, patrolling the borders of the world, watching for any sign that the darkness might return. This ongoing vigilance is crucial. In quantum terms, the wave function is always collapsing, always being measured, always being observed. Reality is not created once and then fixed. It is continuously created through ongoing observation and choice. The moment we stop observing, stop choosing, stop maintaining coherence, entropy begins to increase again, decoherence sets in, and the shadow begins to return. Jung understood this as well. Individuation is not a destination but a process, not an achievement but an ongoing practice. The shadow doesn't stay integrated automatically. It requires continuous consciousness, continuous choice, continuous effort. The moment we become unconscious, the moment we stop observing ourselves, the autonomous complexes begin to operate again, and we fragment back into our constituent parts. This is why Seraphine's final realization is so important. She had chosen to be a hero. And every day, she chose it again. Identity is not something we discover once and then possess forever. Identity is something we create continuously through ongoing observation and choice. We are not human beings but human becomings, not fixed entities but ongoing processes of self-creation. The magic of continuous creation. This brings us to the ultimate principle of magic, the synthesis of all that has come before. Reality is not fixed but fluid, not discovered but created, not observed but participated in. We are not separate observers of an objective reality but entangled participants in an ongoing act of creation. From the quantum perspective, every observation collapses a wave function, every measurement creates a reality, every choice manifests a possibility. We are constantly creating reality through our observations and choices, whether we're aware of it or not. The magic is simply becoming conscious of this process and learning to direct it intentionally. From the Jungian perspective, every moment of consciousness transforms unconscious content into conscious awareness, every integration of shadow increases our available energy, every step toward individuation makes us more whole and more capable. The magic is the transformation of psyche through conscious work, the alchemy of turning the lead of unconscious suffering into the gold of conscious wisdom. These are not separate processes but two descriptions of the same fundamental reality. Consciousness creates reality through observation, choice, and integration. When we understand this, not just intellectually but experientially, not just as theory but as lived practice, we gain access to what can only be called magical powers, the ability to transform ourselves and our world through intentional consciousness. The mechanism of magic. 7 principles for transformation: observation, intention, and manifestation. Let us now synthesize these principles into a coherent understanding of how magic actually works, not as supernatural intervention but as natural consequence of how consciousness interacts with reality. First, observation creates reality. At the quantum level, particles exist in superposition until observed. The act of observation collapses the wave function, manifesting one possibility from the field of all possibilities. This is not metaphor but verified physics. What we observe, we create. Second, intention directs observation. We cannot observe everything simultaneously. Attention is selective. What we choose to observe, what we direct our attention toward, determines which possibilities collapse into actuality. Intention is the rudder that steers observation, and observation is the force that creates reality. Third, integration creates coherence. When the various aspects of ourselves work together rather than against each other, when shadow and persona are integrated rather than fragmented, we achieve psychological coherence. This coherence allows for more powerful, more focused observation and intention. A fragmented psyche observes reality fragmentedly, creating fragmented results. An integrated psyche observes reality coherently, creating coherent results. Fourth, sustained observation creates sustained reality. Reality is not created once but continuously. What we observe repeatedly, we reinforce. What we observe consistently, we manifest persistently. The quantum Zeno effect demonstrates that continuous observation can freeze a system in a particular state. Sustained, intentional observation creates sustained, intentional reality. Fifth, entanglement creates non-local effects. When we become entangled with others, when we achieve unity of purpose and coherence of intention, our combined observation becomes exponentially more powerful. This is not merely additive but synergistic, the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Collective consciousness, when coherent, can create effects that individual consciousness cannot. Sixth, consciousness is negentropic. Consciousness creates order from chaos, meaning from randomness, coherence from decoherence. The light of awareness transforms the darkness of unconsciousness. This is not violation of thermodynamics but recognition that consciousness is an open system that can decrease local entropy by consuming energy and exporting entropy elsewhere. Seventh, transformation requires sacrifice. To create new reality, we must sacrifice old reality. To become something new, we must let go of something old. This is not loss but transformation. The caterpillar must sacrifice its caterpillar nest to become a butterfly. The ego must sacrifice its separateness to achieve the self. The practice of magic. Understanding these principles intellectually is not enough, they must be practiced, embodied, lived. Seraphine's journey provides a template for this practice. 1. Enter the fog. Acknowledge that you don't know who you are, that your identity is not fixed but fluid, that you exist in superposition of multiple possibilities. This is uncomfortable, the ego resists it, but it is necessary. You cannot create a new self while clinging to the old self. 2. Face the mirror. Observe yourself honestly, without judgment or denial. See both your capacity for destruction and your capacity for creation, both your shadow and your light. Recognize that you contain multitudes, that you are not one thing but many things, not fixed but fluid. 3. Confront the shadow. Meet the parts of yourself you've rejected, the aspects you've denied, the capacities you've feared. Don't fight them or flee from them. Acknowledge them, integrate them, transform their energy from autonomous threat to conscious resource. 4. Receive guidance. Seek wisdom from sources beyond your ego, from dreams, from synchronicities, from teachers and guides, from the collective unconscious that speaks through symbol and archetype. Be open to information that contradicts your current self-concept. The ego cannot transform itself, It requires input from the larger self, from the quantum field of possibility that exists beyond conscious awareness. 5. Choose unity over separation. Recognize that you are not isolated but entangled, with others, with the world, with the larger patterns of existence. Seek coherence with those who share your purpose. The power of collective consciousness, when aligned, exceeds anything individual consciousness can achieve. This is not loss of individuality but expansion of it. You become more yourself by recognizing your connection to the whole. 6. Sustain your observation. Transformation is not a single event but an ongoing practice. What you observe once may collapse temporarily, but sustained observation creates sustained reality. Return daily to your intention, to your integrated self, to your chosen identity. The quantum Zeno effect works both ways. Continuous observation of your fragmented self keeps you fragmented, but continuous observation of your integrated self maintains integration. 7. Act from wholeness. Take action in the world that embodies your integrated self. Don't wait until you feel ready or complete. Wholeness is demonstrated through action, not achieved before it. Seraphine didn't wait until she remembered everything or felt certain. She acted from her choice, and the action itself reinforced the reality she was creating. Magic is not passive visualization but active participation in reality creation through intentional choice and committed action. Conclusion: the dragon you choose to be. We began this analysis by proposing that the dragon in the mist operates simultaneously as fantasy narrative, psychological journey, and metaphysical exploration. We can now see that these are not separate levels but unified expressions of a single truth. Consciousness creates reality through observation, choice, and integration. The quantum mechanical framework reveals that reality at its most fundamental level is not fixed but fluid, not objective but participatory. The observer doesn't merely witness reality but participates in creating it through the act of observation. Particles exist in superposition until measured. The wave function collapses through observation. Entangled systems remain connected across space and time. These are not metaphors but verified descriptions of how reality actually operates. The Jungian psychological framework reveals that identity at its most fundamental level is not discovered but created, not fixed but fluid, not given but chosen. The self is not a static entity but a dynamic process of integration. The shadow must be acknowledged and integrated, not repressed. The ego must sacrifice its separateness to achieve the self. Individuation is not a destination but an ongoing practice of conscious choice and integration. These frameworks are not parallel but convergent. They describe the same phenomenon from different perspectives. Consciousness is the force that collapses possibility into actuality, that transforms chaos into order, that creates meaning from randomness. Whether we speak in the language of quantum mechanics or the language of analytical psychology, we are describing the same fundamental process, the creative power of conscious observation and intentional choice. Seraphine's journey embodies this unified truth. She enters the fog, the quantum superposition, the undifferentiated unconscious, lost and uncertain. She faces the mirror, observing herself honestly, seeing multiple possibilities. She confronts the shadow, integrating what she had rejected, transforming autonomous threat into conscious resource. She receives guidance, opening to information beyond her ego's limited perspective. She reunites with her siblings, achieving coherence through unity. She faces the Shadow Lord, directing her integrated consciousness against entropy itself. And she continues her practice, choosing daily to be the hero she has created herself to be. This is not fantasy but instruction manual. Seraphine's journey is our journey. The fog is the uncertainty we all face about who we are and what we're capable of. The mirror is the honest self-observation we all must practice. The shadow dragon is the rejected parts of ourselves we all must integrate. Whisper is the wisdom available to us all when we open beyond ego. The siblings are the communities of purpose we can all create. The Shadow Lord is the entropy we all must resist through conscious, intentional creation of order and meaning. And the magic, the seemingly impossible transformation of self and world, is available to us all, not as supernatural intervention but as natural consequence of understanding and applying these principles. When we recognize that observation creates reality, that intention directs observation, that integration creates coherence, that sustained observation creates sustained reality, that entanglement creates non-local effects, that consciousness is negentropic, and that transformation requires sacrifice, when we understand these principles not just intellectually but experientially, not just as theory but as lived practice, we gain access to the creative power that has always been ours. We are not passive observers of a fixed universe but active participants in an ongoing act of creation. Every moment of self-observation is an act of self-creation. Every choice collapses infinite possibilities into a single actuality. Every integration of shadow increases our available energy. Every alignment with others multiplies our power. Every sustained practice reinforces the reality we're creating. The question is not whether we have this power. Quantum mechanics and depth psychology both confirm that we do. The question is whether we will use it consciously or unconsciously, intentionally or accidentally, coherently or fragmentedly. Will we, like Seraphine in the fog, wander lost in fear and doubt, continuously observing ourselves as monsters and thereby creating that reality? Or will we, like Seraphine facing the Shadow Lord, consciously choose who we will be and pour everything we are into manifesting that choice? Seraphine's final realization is the key. She had chosen to be a hero. And every day, she chose it again. Identity is not something we discover once and possess forever. Reality is not something we create once and then inhabit passively. Consciousness is not a state we achieve and then maintain automatically. All of these are ongoing processes, continuous practices, moment-by-moment choices. You are not the dragon you were. You are not even the dragon you are. You are the dragon you are choosing to become, right now, in this moment, through the act of reading these words and deciding what they mean and how you will respond to them. You are collapsing your wave function with every choice, creating your reality with every observation, manifesting your identity with every action. The fog is always there, waiting for those who need to lose themselves to find themselves. The mirror is always ready to show you possibilities you haven't considered. The shadow is always available for integration. The guide is always present for those who seek wisdom. The community is always forming for those who choose unity. The enemy is always pressing, requiring your conscious resistance. And the choice is always yours, moment by moment, day by day, for as long as you have consciousness to direct. This is the ultimate magic, the deepest truth, the most profound power. You are not a fixed entity but an ongoing act of creation. You are not discovering who you are but creating who you are. You are not observing reality but participating in reality's continuous manifestation. So choose. Choose consciously. Choose intentionally. Choose coherently. Choose sustainably. Choose in unity with others. Choose order over entropy. Choose transformation over stagnation. Choose the dragon you will be. And then, tomorrow, choose again.